my friend. Welcome
Yeah,
to MyFlora Fridays. It's so good to see you. It's been about a month
about a month.
since I saw you up in Niagara Falls, and we had a blast. And I'm so excited to talk to you. I'm so happy that you're on my show. And I think we have been acquainted with each other for probably 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah,
When you were going through the cannabis program, doing your master's in cannabis. What was it? What's the program?
a master's in medical cannabis therapeutics.
Yeah, and I think I met or I became acquainted with you, and you were super active on LinkedIn talking about what you were learning and how cool it was. And I was like, wow, this lady's really cool, and I love her passion and all that. And I think that's when we kind of started talking. And I don't think we really met in person until last year, also at Niagara Falls. So running in the same circles for a few years now, and now we're best friends.
Yes, no,
But so you know you better than I know you. So I'd love for you to tell everybody who you are, what you do, and why you're here. Like what brought you to cannabis.
I'm a registered nurse. I've been a nurse for like 13 years now. I started my nursing career at Johns Hopkins Hospital, working oncology and bone marrow transplant. And I was taught like everything that drives us crazy about the Western medical system is what I was taught and what I believed for a decade, in terms of plant medicine and research and evidence. And it wasn't until, I've done a number of different specialties. My last specialty before I came to cannabis was hospice. And that's when I had this patient who was having seizures. She was on 5 or 6 different seizure medications and like unresponsive to these medications. And I had like read the headlines about CBD and cannabis that it was supposed to help with seizures. The family was on board to try. And we are like, okay, great, let's do it. But like, what do we give? How do we give it? She can't swallow anything because she has a trach. Like, how do we do this? So then I called up a dispensary and they're like, oh, you should try RSO. It cures cancer. I'm like, okay. So we did not do that, fortunately. And we ended up doing a transdermal patch. And within the first day, she had calmed down and her seizures had stopped. And at that point, I was like, there's definitely something here, but these patients don't have medical guidance on how to use this as a medicine. And I wasn't a frequent user myself because as a travel nurse, I had to pee in a cup every 3 months. So it just like it wasn't on my radar. I didn't have a chronic illness, and I was taught the propaganda that it was bad. So and then I would go into a dispensary and be completely overwhelmed with all of the options. And I was like, there's no way that like a 65-year-old lady coming in here is going to know what to get. So somebody's got to be able to guide these elderly patients on how to use this. So that's when I started learning, and I started the business at the same time. I started learning from patients as I was teaching them. And I jumped in. I started going to conferences. CanMed was my first conference back in 2022. I'm still relatively new to the space. I own that. And then I also started a master's program to get a master's degree in medical cannabis therapeutics at that time. So, and I graduated from that almost 2 years ago now. Wow. Yeah. And then the business started as Trusted Canna Nurse, and we have since rebranded to EntheaCare and ventured into the psychedelic space. We have a line of really great hemp products. We have done research.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah.
So yeah, I knew you as the trusted canna nurse.
Yes.
And then you rebranded and you went for EntheaCare. And I don't know the story behind that or what the name means when you kind of had already established a brand.
Yeah. It's interesting the story of how it happened. That like we were rolling great with Trusted Canna Nurse. I mean, it was kind of a cheeky name, but like it worked, right?
Hmm.
And then I got a letter from another nurse for trademark infringement. And I was like, what? And this
Oh,
nurse doesn't even live in the States. So yeah, and I don't want to name it. It's easy to find. But that's like we fought that for a long time. That was like people aren't gonna get confused between me and you. Like we offer different things, whatever. And I was like, you know what? Like we're in the psychedelic space also. we've kind of outgrown trusted Canada Nurse, and there's more than one of us.
Hmm.
So like let's rebrand and make it simpler and also something that is trademarkable. So then that's where EntheaCare was born. And that comes from the word entheogen, which is a medicine that induces an altered state of consciousness, such as cannabis, mushrooms, and other psychedelics. So Enthea is just a little bit more feminine version of that, and then care. So that's how we became EntheaCare.
And you mentioned that I know there's you and there's Ariane and there's more than that now. Like, how many nurses do you have working for
Yeah.
EntheaCare?
Yeah. So we have two nurses who are the job of the nurses is mostly doing our microdosing programs because we don't get a lot of people coming to us for help with cannabis because like at this point the market most people have kind of figured it out. They just want to find a place for good products. The
Hmm.
education that we provide is more at like doing webinars and stuff like that for medical professionals. We have two nurses doing the microdosing. We have another pediatric nurse who will take care of our pediatric patients when we need them. My brother's a pharmacist, so he helps make our suppositories and helps with medication interactions when we need them. We have an amazing admin up in Canada who will cross every T and dot every I for us. And yeah, that's the home team, our core team.
Okay. And you guys are all over the place, right? You're not
Yes.
just like you're in California and Ariane is not.
Yeah, she's in Texas. Lacey is in, I believe it's Kansas, Kansas or Oklahoma. I always forget. But she's there. My brother's in Denver. Our pediatric nurse is in Oregon. And our admin is in Canada.
I know I contacted you a while back. We had a family friend whose son was going through some stuff and was thinking about like none of the traditional, medicine or
Mm-hmm.
therapeutics was working for him and he was kind of silently going crazy. And so I contacted you because I was like, what, where, how do you find help? And he's actually in, I think, Europe or something. I don't even remember what it
Yeah.
was now. But you had this incredible program where you can like sign up for a consultation where you can sit down with you or so, and I don't know if this is true or not, but you guys kind of all specialize in different areas. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of overlap, but like the two nurses are definitely like they know far more about psychedelics. I know from my own experience, but I don't know as much about psychedelics as I do about cannabis. And then they definitely know a lot more about holistic health than I do. And so they're able to coach people on like holistic modalities as well as psychedelics and cannabis.
So like when somebody gets onto your website and they're looking for some sort of direction or information on these types of therapy, does it just go to like one of you or like how do you do these consultations?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So if people are just looking for hemp products and need some nurse guidance on a hemp product, then they can book a free product guidance call and talk to one of us. And then we'll, like, based on what they're telling us, we can make a product recommendation, just to help guide them in that. If people are looking for help with microdosing, specifically microdosing mushrooms, then we have one-on-one programs where they work with a nurse over the course of 2 months and we walk them through their microdosing journey, helping them find their right dose, their right regimen. We help them adjust it if needed, and then we're offering other holistic modalities along the way to help them regulate their nervous system and get the effects that they're looking for and the changes in their life that they're trying to achieve.
I think that's so cool that you have that program and that help available. I feel like not enough people know about it, and it's not scary to like ask for information and ask questions, right? You're not
Mm-hmm.
actually taking any drugs, but and
Right.
and it might be less scary, talking to a registered nurse about, what is this? How does it work? What can it treat my XYZ? Like instead of just, I don't know, and oh my God, like there's so many places where psychedelics are being talked about and like I feel like some of the information out there is maybe a little bit irresponsible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my brother has, various um imbalances. And these kinds of drugs, they really screwed him up, like
Yeah.
probably more than he would have been had he not been doing those kinds of drugs when he was, mid to late teens into his
Yep.
20s.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there is a lot of, we see it with cannabis too. We see irresponsible use in youth. And I think that directly comes from prohibition, that like pretty much, like, not only did we prohibit the substances themselves, but we prohibited the research and the education of our medical professionals, so they can't have these conversations. And then, we just have like, okay, drugs are bad, cannabis is bad, mushrooms are bad, but then people are seeing these phenomenal outcomes in other people. They don't have the medical guidance, so then they just go and do it themselves. And then if they have some genetics that don't agree with that medicine, that's when we see adverse effects, like what happened with your brother. It wasn't the drug itself, it was likely the combo of the substance with his genetics that produced that outcome. So when you have medical professionals who know the things to look out for, and okay, maybe if you have a family history of this, either we don't do it, or maybe we get you genetically tested to see if you have the variant that makes you susceptible to these mental health issues. And I feel like that's not what's happening. Instead, we're seeing these synthetic mushroom chocolate bars and gummies in smoke shops, and people are consuming them and then like having adverse effects because it's not the natural thing. It's not natural psilocybin that they're consuming, it's or natural THC. It's the synthetic crap. And a lot of this is just because of prohibition, and we're seeing the market far ahead. It's the huge gap in the market and the medical side of it and medical professionals.
So let's talk about that. Like, especially in the hemp space. But I didn't realize that there were synthetic psychedelics. I mean, LSD is a synthetic psychedelic and it's been around forever and it's super safe. I mean,
Yeah.
like you can't overdose on it, but it also is an extremely powerful
Yes.
psychedelic, and if you take a lot of it, you can really mess your brain up. But yeah, like I didn't realize there are synthetic psychedelics
Yeah.
as well as all these synthetic hemp products. And I know you're super passionate about this conversation because a lot of people are experiencing shit
Adverse.
products.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I love me some LSD and other like classic psychedelics. The MDMA. I don't think that's considered a classic psychedelic, but that's been around for a while. What we have found is there are gummy brands. I think I posted about this like a year or two ago. There's and they're advertised as mushrooms, but then you look at the ingredients, you look at their lab results, and there are no mushrooms in the product. It's some sort of like loophole DMT that they have in there or something crap like that, because it is illegal to sell psilocybin in most states. But yet you go into a smoke shop and you see, oh, magic mushroom chocolate bar. That's cool. But it's not natural psilocybin mushrooms in there. It's some synthetic product. And that's what we're seeing with the kratom space also. Kratom, I think, could be a fantastic medicine in its original plant form, but yet we're doing the 7-OH thing and we're seeing really bad outcomes from the 7-OH thing.
And just like in the cannabis hemp space, there's like 7-OH is fine and it's great and it's natural. And then there's like, people are like, kratom is a plant, you know, extract or just a ground up
Mm-hmm.
kratom leaves. It's not the same as this 7-OH. It's like the
Right.
THCP or some of these stronger cannabinoids that are not natural, either not naturally found in the plant or are only found in very, very, very tiny quantities. Like 7-OH is technically natural. So is
Mm-hmm.
THCP technically, but like they're putting it into products at really high doses, and we don't know anything about like dosing or what's safe, like in terms of even your like toxicity to your liver or your whatever. I don't know that much about that kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
yeah, as a nurse, you must be seriously concerned about that.
Yeah. I mean, we see it in this is exactly what I mean. can we blame humans for doing this? This is what we did with opium and poppy is, we took what was naturally in the plant, like the opium can poppies can like safely be consumed for the most part. But it's when we isolate it, synthesize it, make it more potent, that's where we get the dangerous drugs from. And that's exactly what's happening with these other plants, with kratom. I mean, it happened with cocaine, like natural coca leaves, like are like a pretty great thing, but the cocaine version is not. And we see it with cannabis and these synthetic cannabinoids, and we're seeing new ones all the time. And it's gross that people are thinking that it's not their fault, thinking that it's natural and safe. And then we wonder why they become dependent or develop CHS or like develop psychosis,
Mm-hmm.
because like that's not how nature intended us to use that medicine.
Right. And CHS is really becoming I mean, the headlines are really, really sensational. This new cannabis disease is sweeping the nation. It's like, no, it's still super rare, but it's gone from, really rare to a little bit more common. And I personally think it's because of the the greater access to more concentrated cannabis products. So we've got, back in the day, in order to get some of these concentrated products, it was either like hash or hot knives, which is the equivalent of like a dab. But you like had to have the accoutrements, you had to have the know-how to do it in your house. You couldn't just go down to the store and buy like a jar of wax or shatter or
Uh-huh.
like whatever. And I feel like just that access, that really easy access to these really high THC products is, what could be causing some of these adverse reactions like CHS. It's kind of like fast food. Like hamburgers and fries are not necessarily bad for you, and to make them at home, it takes a lot of effort and you have to do a lot of prep work. But like just to go down to McDonald's and buy a hamburger and fries, like that's so easy. It takes 5 minutes and it's
Mm-hmm.
pretty relative. Well, it used to be cheap, but now it's kind of expensive. But you know what I mean? Like make
Right.
hamburger and fries, but make it from scratch. Like, yeah, do dabs, but like do it, make it yourself because it then becomes a lot more difficult. And yeah, so CHS and then there's the pesticide conversation. It seems like there's two camps. CHS is real,
Mm.
CHS is not real. CHS is due to an actual physiological response to an overwhelming amount of, flooding your system with cannabinoids, or it's pesticides, right?
Right, right.
I want you to talk about that.
Yeah. There's so much to that. Absolutely, we have easier access to high concentrated oils. I mean, Seth Yekatan just posted that vapes have surpassed flower in California, and we are the first to do that. And I'm like, no,
No.
because what we found in our research is those who are vaping only developed CHS so much faster than those who are smoking. Like we're talking years. In smoking, people developed CHS symptoms like around 10 years. But with vaping, vape carts, not dry herb vaping, with the vape carts, it was like 2 years or less that people started developing symptoms. So we're like, it is a huge issue. I firmly believe that our ECS was not meant to be blasted with a 90% distillate multiple times a day. Yeah, there are benefits to some concentrates, but we're supposed to be like, if we want to use this in the natural plant form, it's the hash, because
Mhm.
that contains the minor cannabinoids and all of the other beneficial parts of the plant. Whereas the distillate is some garbage that's just distilled THC. And like, our bodies were not meant to tolerate that. So yes, THC is a great molecule, beneficial for so many things, but it's powerful. And to think that it's not powerful enough to cause adverse effects, especially with long-term use, is ignorant, and we definitely see that. And people who are picking up the vape carts, they can't put them down. Not everybody, of course, but they develop this dependency on their THC instead of, like, as Arian speaks to it, like they develop a codependency instead of a co-creative relationship with
Mhm.
their vape carts and their cannabis. So what we found in our research, how we address this. So first of all, in order to test products that people are consuming, like like we have to be able to handle the products and ship them to a shipping lab and all of that. And that's just not something that our research was set up to do. We probably need like a DEA license to handle products. So we weren't in our research, we weren't testing products. Also, people develop CHS, like I said, over the course of years. Find me a person that has used the exact same product over the years. So what we did instead was we asked where people got their cannabis from and what their symptoms were. And we found that symptoms were not significantly different at all between like whether they got it from home grow or a smoke shop or a licensed dispensary or an unregulated source. Their symptoms were the same. So if it was a pesticide that was behind CHS, like the likelihood that it was a single pesticide across all of these sources, like we had like every continent was represented in our research. I think probably all 50 states, like the likelihood, and I'm not involved in cultivation, so maybe you can speak to like pesticides used in cultivation and how likely it is that the exact same pesticide is used across all of these markets, across all of these sources, including home. And we also found that 28% of people said that their CHS symptoms were triggered by trying to quit. And we see this often. People go on vacation, they don't bring their weed with them, and then end up in the hospital in severe withdrawal and a CHS episode. People
That
can't.
sucks.
Yeah, right, right. So that, and like find me a pesticide where that is the, like withdrawing from it causes nausea and vomiting.
CHS is a weird monster. I think that cannabis, heavy chronic use, even if you don't have CHS, and again, it's rare and there seems to be a genetic predisposition to it. And I actually think, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, there might be a dietary component to it because I've heard that people who seem to come down with CHS seem to have a poor diet many times,
Mm-hmm.
and so I don't know if it's like, increased saturated fats or salt or grease, any and or all of the above. But
Mm-hmm.
so it is still rare. Yeah, so it is still rare. Oh, but yeah, cannabis use in general is kind of a weird thing because if you're a heavy chronic user, even if you don't have CHS, right? It's you start to get adverse effects from flooding your ECS constantly. So then you want to dial it back a bit, and maybe you want to quit cold turkey, or maybe you want to wean yourself off. But then that when you pull that back, your body needs time to adjust to you not giving cannabinoids all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have different adverse effects like nightmares and, you know, gastro gas because the ECS governs all of those systems. Like, it takes what, like 2 weeks to adjust to not flooding your system. And that withdrawal from that's not pleasant either. And so it's like
Right.
you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yes, yes. And people, it's so common for people to say that, oh, there's no withdrawal. Like you can't, there's no addiction potential, like you can't have withdrawals. And then they bring up the example of themselves. I smoked for 10 years and then I never had any withdrawal effects. So therefore nobody else has any withdrawal
Yeah.
effects. Nothing drives me more nuts than that is when people use their own N of one as evidence that it doesn't exist in the world. And and withdrawal is real. Like cannabis withdrawal is real. It's not lethal, except if it triggers a CHS episode that does not get, that could get severe. But common withdrawal symptoms are the can have night sweats because THC impacts our body's temperature regulatory system. So, nightmares, like mood swings, like agitation, anxiety, and appetite changes. But it can venture into severe, and it could be nausea, vomiting, like severe temperature changes. Like people can and do develop withdrawal symptoms. And I think this is where I would really like to see research on genetics is like those who, if you have two people smoking or consuming the exact same amount, one experiences withdrawal symptoms, the other does not. What is the difference in their genetics? And
Mm-hmm.
are those the same genes related to CHS, or are those
Mm-hmm.
a completely different set of genetics?
Mm-hmm.
So who wants to
Yeah,
step?
yeah, we got some work to do, huh?
Right?
So, you know, yeah, CHS is like the worst of the worst that anybody could probably experience through cannabis use. And know of, I think there was one case study where synthetic, like 100%, I think it was Marinol or something like that, triggered a CHS episode, indicating that it's not pesticides because a synthetic has never touched a pesticide. There's no reason for it. Has there been any other cases that you know of where either synthetic or other cannabinoids trigger an episode?
I believe there was one on like a JW synthetic, and I don't think that's not a converted one, right? I don't think like the JWs are converted. That's a strong, super strong synthetic cannabinoid, often used in research. But yeah, I think that's the case study I can think of. In our research, it was the majority of people reported using Delta 9 THC. 20% did not know what they were consuming. And
It's concerning.
yeah, that they didn't know. Otherwise, we saw Delta 8, we saw HHC, we saw the hemp derived cannabinoids, and we also saw it in edibles and beverages to a much lesser degree than inhaled forms, but we saw those. And, if we're like eating and consuming something like a pesticide in like a very small amount that's going to be in a gummy, like we consume pesticides every day from foods that we eat, but
Mhm.
we never see CHS outside of heavy cannabis use. So that again, like makes you question that, like the pesticide
Yeah.
theory.
So, like, this whole confusing, well, it's not confusing to me or you because we know what it is, but this whole hemp thing that's going on where you can purchase hemp products at the local gas station, at the local smoke shop, I feel like most people have no idea what these things are, how they're made, what they do. They just know that they can buy it and it'll get you high, just like cannabis, but
Mm-hmm.
it's safer because it's hemp. Somehow, like hemp is more of a like chiller version
Right.
than marijuana, like, you know what I mean? And so what do you see out there in terms of like the people that you talk to, the people that you interact with, the people that you know, in hemp?
I mean, people are coming to us mostly because they want to try hemp, but they're scared of the products that they see. We have heard some horror stories of some of the stuff that's out there. We had a client come to us, and her son was using what he thought was THCA diamonds that he got from a smoke shop in Texas, and the mom was concerned about it, so she sent the diamonds to a drug testing lab, and it tested positive for methamphetamine and negative for THC. So people have a right to be nervous about what they see, and the people often selling the stuff don't know, barely know anything about it, don't know how it works in the body, like other than it might get you high or get you more high than THC. So with the hemp products, I'm never buying anything from a smoke shop. It just can't be trusted. Even if it is just a bottle of CBD, well, how old is that? Show me your lab test showing that it's not full of some pesticide or solvent or something like that. So yeah, people are rightfully nervous about that stuff. So then they come to us because they want a trusted source of something that's actually going to work, that is considered safe. Of course, I can't make FDA claims that it's safe and effective, but we haven't had any safety issues and people say that it works. People are coming to us for medical reasons because they need help managing their symptoms, or they come to us because they can't quit weed and we help them quit their weed also.
Yeah, uh, the whole hemp thing, like CBD, I think is great stuff. I use
Mhm.
it, on the daily. I've got, a CBD, CBG nano emulsion that I add to my, smoothie every day. My boyfriend uses it too. And I do notice that it gets rid of, the old lady aches and pains and it helps me focus. And that could be real or it could be just be a placebo. I don't know, whatever. It's
Hmm.
fine either way. Either way, it's working,
Yeah.
right? It's doing something. My brain, if my it's my brain doing it, that's cool. If it's the actual compound doing it, that's cool too. But I feel like, I know you have some products that you provide, you are on your website and stuff like that. And there's some other good products on the market that I would trust and I buy,
Hmm.
but but how do people like find a quality product that isn't, full of pesticides and solvents and things like that? Because there's so many products.
There's so many. There are like, I think it's either like 4,000 or 40,000 like hemp brands, CBD brands out there. And I mean, you have to look at who's behind it, right?
Mm,
Like with Charlotte's Web, we know like that's a brand that I trust. I think that they don't always use whole plant. They use CO2 extraction, which we don't have to get into, but just lessens the quality of it. But that's a trusted brand, and the story behind that brand, is a good story. So I trust that. Dr. Sulak, we have like a physician who like specially formulated his products, and there are some other good brands out there, but you have to look at who's behind it and who's making it and what else are they providing in addition to the product. Are they providing the test results? Are they providing support in how to use it the right way? Like I know Charlotte's Web because so many people use that for seizures and pediatric epilepsy that like a lot of their stuff comes with syringes and their bottles are such that like you can use a syringe to appropriately dose. I think that's amazing. So yeah, you just have to look at the brand, who's behind it, and if like to me, if there's no face or story behind the brand, what is there to get me to trust it?
mm-hmm. So if you can't find information, if you can't get a COA, if you can't get answers to questions, things like that, then
Mm-hmm.
what is behind that company and how are they doing things? Is it in a bathtub in Alabama or is it
Right.
an actual like company that cares and does their
Yeah.
research and stuff?
Yeah, and I think that goes for the cannabis side too. Like you can look up the cannabis brand and the flower brand and see like a some of them have Instagram pages and they show like their actual farms. And like there's one in particular, they grow the pink boost goddess up in Northern California. Botanical, something botanical. It's like right there. But anyways, like you can see, like I've met the growers there. And one is this woman who like talks to the plants and she's so spiritual and it's like, oh my gosh, I would like trust you with my baby. Like, and I definitely trust you to like grow this beautiful award-winning flower because I trust the energy with like how that's grown. But there are people like in other brands, I don't want to name them, but it's like, ugh, I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole, you know. Even with a clean suspected or supposed clean COA, I'm not touching that.
Yeah. It really is difficult to like, when you, especially when you walk into a dispensary or even a CBD shop, like to look at all the products that are
Yeah.
available and just make a decision, like yeah, it's a little bit overwhelming.
And bud tenders aren't able to give specialized medical guidance either. I mean, a lot of them will give their own personal recommendations, but sometimes they project their own tolerance onto their people and they're like, okay, take this 10 milligram gummy, like it won't be that bad. But we've had patients hallucinate on 5 milligrams. And
Mm-hmm.
so like there's nuance to it and then medication interactions. And yeah, it's such a weird system how we do it.
And honestly, bud tenders aren't paid to be full on medical and health experts. A bud
Mm-hmm.
tender, and there's nothing. I'm like, I have the utmost respect for bud tenders, and I think that they ought to get paid more because of
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them do have a really deep amount of knowledge about the cannabis plant and their product because they care, but they don't get paid, y- you know,
Right.
to have that depth of knowledge. Like bud tender. I mean, they're equivalent of like a bartender,
Right.
or somebody who works at the grocery store. Like, oh, you need yeah, I don't know, mayonnaise. It's on aisle 9, like that.
Yeah,
And then there's a whole bunch of mayonnaise, and like, which mayonnaise is the best? Well, I don't know, like
right. And they're not
whatever.
teaching you how to cook the food at the grocery
Right,
store.
right.
So
They can tell you, well, I don't know. A lot of people like Hellman's, and then a lot of people like Miracle Whip. I don't know, like
yeah,
depends what you like. Like it's
yeah,
very difficult to guide somebody to a product based on your own preferences. You can say, this is a popular product. People seem to really like this, but that's like what I feel like the extent of a bud tender should know, because that's everything else is above their pay grade, which
yeah, yeah, which is super sad. And I think that a lot of that is because of 280E and margins being super slim. So then they can't invest in the talent that they have in arguably like one of the most important roles in the cannabis industry is the bud tender role
they
because
are
those
the face, they're consumer facing. They're like the only
yeah,
thing that the consumer comes in contact with.
right, like they are the bridge between like the revenue, the business revenue, and the business expenses is like right there. And it's really hard to invest in that, and that's a big reason you don't see nurses or medical professionals in most dispensaries. Well, multiple reasons, but like there's no margin there to invest in medical professionals in those spaces because margins are so thin. And we have to like, that we have this problem where we're hyper fixated on THC content because we're serving this market that only wants high THC content because they haven't been taught by medical professionals that, hey, that's actually going to do some damage down the line. Like if we're going to use it as medicine, let's scale it back and use it this way. So it is like this whole messed up system that like now we're trying to legalize and make it Schedule 3. Like I feel like we're just so far beyond repair in that.
That whole okay, so this the products based on THC, I feel like that is one big like negative feedback loop kind of thing. Like we've put so much emphasis on THC, like you have to test for THC, that has to be printed on the package. Now people are wondering, like, oh, that's a really important number. I should pay attention to that number. Oh, and the top shelf things have the highest THC and cost the most money. That must mean that it's a higher quality product. So then they equate THC to quality and experience, and then the cultivators and the C-suites are like, no, we have to grow higher yields, higher THC. That's what we want. If it tests below 25%, then we won't be able to sell it. And so they're dictating to the consumer what the consumer should have rather than what the consumer wants, and kind of pushing lab testing into being, yeah, what's the word? Because if they're producing results that are less than 25% THC, the client, who is the cultivator or the dispensary, are not going to come back because they can't print that 25 plus THC on the packet. They can't sell it. The consumers won't buy it. And as we are all knowing, THC is not indicative of quality. It is not indicative of your experience. Like it is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of times the higher the THC, it's causing adverse effects, anxiety, things like that. And it's the more balanced, lower THC that people are finding out it's way more pleasurable, but are not available on the shelf because
Right. You can't find a 1-to-1. You can't find CBG flower. And it's again this like vicious cycle. But like, and there's research supporting that a 15% flower will get people more high than a 30% flower. And something, the same thing with rosin, like a 60% live rosin will get people more high than like an 85% distillate. And people have a better experience. I can connect you with that guy if you want to have a conversation with him about that EEG research. But yeah, there's research to support that. And then there's consumer reports also. But the other thing too is like the heavy taxation and the high cost. Like I don't even go to dispensaries anymore because the cost just isn't worth it. So people want to get the most bang for their buck. Why are they going to get 15% THC for $30 when they can get 30% THC for $35? So it's again a result of prohibition and heavy taxation and like I don't know if we'll find our way out of this, but the pendulum is so far this way. And then this is where we're seeing the psychosis and the CHS and the issues. And we need to bring it back to the middle and have a more balanced outlook on this.
Yeah, so I've talked about this before. Again, I don't know if you were there back in the day, but like, I don't understand why people think weed should be so cheap. Like, back in the day, an eighth of kind bud would cost you $50. A quarter ounce would cost you $100.
Hmm.
Like, that was how many years ago was that? 30 years ago?
30 years ago.
Right. If it had kept up with inflation, like it's cheaper than that now. How come? Like I don't
Yeah.
understand it's grown indoors with all these quality controls, with these fancy lights, with these nutrients. Like why do we think that weed should be so cheap? I don't understand it. It should be more expensive than it was in the 90s when it was grown. Well, granted the kind weed uh, a lot of times came from Eugene, Oregon, or Mendocino
Hmm.
County, or Humboldt. Like, and if it came with that attached to it, like usually you didn't know what strain it was. It was just, oh, this is kind bud from Humboldt, and it was like, oh, damn, that's going to be good stuff.
Yeah.
But, like, it wasn't grown inside. It was, sun grown. Or if it came from, Mexico or ditchweed or brickweed, it was cheaper. It was like half of that. It was still 25
Hmm.
or $50 for, an eighth or a quarter.
Yeah.
And that was for shitty ass weed with like stems and seeds and shit in it. Right?
Right.
But it did the job. I feel like the prices are very, very comparable to that now, but I just don't understand why people think weed should be so cheap. It should be way more expensive than it is.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. I think probably the big thing is that like inflation, wages have not kept up with inflation at all. And the tax piece of it is huge. That like all this money, like not all of the money that we're paying for it is going to the growers. And, like what are the margins of the growers? Like it should be
So it should be
instead,
way more expensive.
yeah, instead it's going to our government. And then, the supply and demand, if like the supply is super high, which it is right now in California, that's going to drive the price down, but we still have the taxes. So I think that if we had more of a free market and, do we need less regulations? Like we still want good, clean bud and amazing flower, but the taxation and the regulations are like cutting people out, and
Mhm.
the license fees and what LA County did to their dispensaries.
Weed should be more expensive than it is. Like you're specifically California, but yeah, like it's really expensive to get a license. It's really expensive. Like the taxes for that are like super expensive. You have to do all of these tests, right? And the tests are not
Ah,
free. They're not done by the state, by the regulatory agencies.
right,
You have to pay for them. And you cannot sell your flower or your products without having that test done. And to do the whole panel test, which includes, your cannabinoids, terpenes, heavy metals, mycotoxins, like all of the things, like that's like a $700 test.
right,
And you have to do it for every batch.
yep. And then you hope and pray that it comes back favorable for you,
Yep.
both in potency and the purity and the cleanliness of it. Then if
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't, then you're out that much money also. And I think that testing should be done by the state and paid for by the state. Because if these places are paying all these taxes, and right now in California, like I think what I saw is the taxes are going to these fake daycare centers that aren't even open. And like that alone is so messed up. But if the testing was state sponsored, I know there are other states that have done this and there have been issues with it. But to me, like that in combo with educating on the risks of high THC and the necessity of bringing the THC potency down, then maybe we can see this cultural shift away from THC potency, hyperfixation,
Mm-hmm. Because
maybe.
I really don't see any reason for, I mean, I don't think THC should be front and center. I don't, that's not the most important number. You need kind of a more holistic number on there. I don't even think terpenes are like super that necessary. Russ would disagree. We did
Don't
disagree,
tell them.
but well, we had a really great conversation about this. And, I think that even like heavy metals, like if you don't have heavy metals in your grow, like where would that come from if you like you could, if you're in the same facility with the same water source and you're growing in the, cocoa or, hydroponically, like why do you need a heavy metal test, a whole panel of heavy metal testing every single time? Like that
Right.
seems a little bit weird. Yeah, we need mycotoxin testing and other microbes, but are we testing for the right ones? Because we're, smoking versus ingesting produce are like two different things, and that's where we get our testing measures from.
Right. And do we put tobacco through the same type of testing standards? Do we put our own produce through the same type of testing standards?
Right.
Like, I'm not going to COA on my romaine lettuce. Like, and that's like likely full of pesticides.
But there is an argument to be made that you can wash your lettuce at home.
True.
You can't really wash your wheat. I mean, you could, but it's not really recommended. So I think, and same thing with tobacco leaves, like they do put them through various washing and treating and whatever, which we maybe don't want to do to cannabis. There's this idea of remediation and or sterilization. I haven't seen much research on how that affects the trichomes or the constituents, the compounds that are in the plant, but I have a feeling not great.
It can't be great, right?
And I think there's a lot of people out there that don't even know that there are people that are irradiating either before harvest or as either a step, like a kill step, just to ensure that there's nothing growing on there.
Mm,
Or after harvest, just a quick little, irradiation treatment to make sure that it's going to pass testing. Or it didn't pass testing, send it back, irradiate it, send it back, now it passes. Like, I don't think that the people out there who are buying these products know that this is going on because nobody is required to print that kind of stuff on any labels.
right. Right. Yeah.
And I've heard stories about people saying, "Oh, all the stuff from the dispensary tastes like shit or it doesn't taste like anything, it has no smell or like what happened to it." And I think a lot of it is people doing these irradiation methods to kill and pass testing. And
Right.
they're ruining perfectly good weed.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I would love to see us more in like like a farmer's market style type model, where, people are just buying directly from the growers. But we have to, it's America and this is capitalism. So there has to be a process for everything. And, I don't know. What do you want to see? What do you think would be the solution?
So interestingly, you're the second person who's brought this up. So Chris Fonts, I was talking to him and he suggested having like a farmer's market, like a cottage license, where you can go to like a farmer's market and you can
Mm,
sell, and it's a lot less strict and it doesn't cost as much money. And it's just you and your plants and you're selling flour or clones or like,
yeah.
I don't know, concentrates that you made with your flat iron at home or whatever the case may be. And then a step up from that, depending on how much you're growing or how much you're selling, you get into a craft license and then you get into a bigger license and then you get into the multi-state operator license and each tier is like a different sort of responsibility or a
Mhm.
different level of I don't
Yeah.
know what the
Yeah.
word is, but
Yeah.
we don't expect that the person at the farmer's market, we would expect that they're using sterile conditions to jar their raspberry jelly. We kind of assume that they are, but there's nobody checking on them to make sure that they're producing a safe product. It's sort of like a buyer beware. Like Mary made this in her own kitchen. Do you trust Mary? I do trust Mary because I like Mary and I know where she lives and I'm going to go get her if she makes me sick.
Right. And I think that we see that with GMP, which is good manufacturing practices, which are like these set of standards. With our oils, our gummies are made in GMP, but our oils are not. Our oils are small batch, ethanol extracted, whole plant, full spectrum, like the very raw stuff. And these are award-winning oils and they have worked for so many people, but they're not GMP. So then, therefore, that makes it harder to get them into other markets because, especially international markets, because they require this GMP. But we are definitely more on like the small batch farmers market style, manufacturing right now. So and this is the best medicine. Like this is where the good medicine is at, in my opinion. Of course, I'm biased, but yeah. So like just because it's not GMP doesn't mean that it's bad. And you even have like GMP stuff that's not the greatest. That's like, you'll get 10, 20, 100 milligram distillate gummies that are made GMP, but like that's gonna make somebody sick. 100 milligram gummy.
So cannabis has a very strong flavor, right? It just does, and some people don't care for it. I think it grows on people, and I do think that like we do the flavor a disservice often by covering it up with sugar and
Yep.
dessert flavors when it's really not a dessert type of flavor. It's more of like a savory, in my opinion, flavor, like
Mhm.
rosemary or something like that. In your oils, do you put anything in it to give it a more palatable flavor, or is it just pure cannabis oil?
Our CBD oil has some mint in it, so there's a mild mint flavor in that. Otherwise, nothing else has a flavor. This is our most concentrated one that's over 100 milligrams of cannabinoids per ml. So it's really concentrated. And this is hempy and earthy, and it has CBDA and CBGA. So it's got a little bit of spice that hits you in the back of the throat. And this is definitely an acquired taste. Yeah, it is strong. I've been consistently using this, and like it gets easier every single time that I
Mm-hmm.
do it. But yeah, it's strong and earthy, and yeah, the ones that taste like an orange dreamsicle, like, ugh. And if my kids need to use it, and like I get it, taste is an issue for some people, and we find ways around that. This can also be put in a capsule, so my kids can swallow pills. So when my kid had a concussion, we put this in a capsule for him, and he swallowed it, and
Mm-hmm.
it worked great that way. So, and there are people that will, like, we offer the service of capping it for them because they either can't do the tincture or they can't do the taste.
Okay. I just learned about these, like, I don't know what they're made of, like rice paper or something like that. And I think they were using it for like to take maybe kava or kratom. Kratom
Mhm.
tastes disgusting. And it's like these really thin dissolvable sheets. And so you put, and I think they're in a cone shape. So you like, or you can make them into a cone shape. So then you like put your stuff, your
Uh,
powder or your liquid in this paper, seal it with water, and then you can just put it in your mouth and then swallow it with water, and nothing touches the inside of your mouth. So if it's really disgusting, you can like get it past all your taste buds.
oh wow, interesting. Follow the paper itself?
Yeah, yeah, it like
Huh.
dissolves. I was watching, and I actually learned it on TikTok because this girl just sitting there like eating the guy's papers, and he's like, "Stop eating my papers!" And she's like, "But I like the way that they crunch and then they dissolve." And she's like sitting there eating these
Oh my,
papers.
do you think that could work with oil?
I think so. I think it works for anything that you have to ingest that doesn't taste good, or that is, like I don't know if you had to take cinnamon, you can't put cinnamon in your mouth. Like
Right.
it'll just come, you'll cough like the cinnamon challenge. So if you needed to take something that was like super powdery and didn't dissolve in water, or it was really gross. But speaking of TikTok,
TikTok.
yeah. So you have been really successful on TikTok, and one of the things about being on social media and in the cannabis space trying to do cannabis education is that these social media platforms are not always tolerant of
Mm.
talking about cannabis. And I don't know why we're picking on cannabis because there's so much worse things out there that make it onto the internet. But you have been really successful with social media, and I have always loved your TikToks, your short delivery. Like you give education, like really good, solid education snips, in the format that those platforms were designed for, like under a minute. And I'm just like, holy shit, she just like schooled everybody. That was awesome.
Oh,
So
thank you.
you should talk about like your TikTok and Instagram, how you, I don't know, like your journey to being
Yeah.
an influencer, or whatever you call it, a content creator.
Yeah, I don't think I'm an influencer at all, but I do create content. And I started like creating at the very beginning because I have this thing in my head that like, oh my gosh, if this is new information for me, like I got to tell everybody about this. And like I still have that running through my head when I learn new interesting things. And so I just started creating stuff at the beginning, and my videos at the beginning are laughable and super, super cringe. But I've like over the years, I think I'm in my fifth year of creating content. I've just been able to refine it. And I've kind of gotten to the point that like I'm not exactly sure what to create content on anymore. Do I repost the old stuff? Do I like repeat the old stuff in a different way? Do I just talk about new stuff? That I wonder if like other creators get to this point too. But yeah, and I've, you know, in TikTok, I grew my following to 77,000 the first year and then got it shut down. Like the account was deleted. I had to get a new phone in order to even log into the app again because like my device was blocked. So I had taken a break from TikTok after that. Then when I got the new phone, I got back on TikTok, and now I just like approach it from like super educational. I think they are much less restrictive now. I don't know if it's the new ownership or something, but they are far less restrictive. I can talk about a lot of things and even show a lot of things without issue. And then, Instagram is a really hard one to grow for me because I think the content that I put out is very like focused on education, and I'll say the quiet part out loud about like the drawbacks of heavy use. So it doesn't always get seen. Whereas you have these other influencers who like are heavy users and aren't afraid to talk about their heavy use. So then the viewers they feel like they're seen, right? And they're like, it's kind of like an echo chamber in that way. So it like Instagram is hard. Facebook, I've had a couple of videos go viral on Facebook, but what's interesting with Facebook is that your follower count does not matter. I could have 3,000 followers and my video will get the exact same number of views as 140,000, which is what I have now. So it's like Facebook just doesn't matter. And when stuff goes viral on Facebook, that's where the scum of the earth go to project their own self-hate onto me, which is what I have experienced multiple times. So at this point, it's just like, it's laughable, but interesting. Like that should be a study on the type of people who use each platform, because Instagram, one video I'll post on Instagram will get support from our people. Like when we just sent out free gummies to any order that shipped to Minnesota, like in support of Minnesota. It was not like an outwardly anti-ice thing, but it was like just in support of Minnesota. Like we see what you're going through, like let us help a little bit. And I posted the same video on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram got so much support, and Facebook, like people came for me, and there's so much vitriol and hatred in those comments. So it's really interesting, the different platforms and the type of people who use the different platforms. Actually, I think LinkedIn, actually, even though LinkedIn is like one fairly big echo chamber of all of us cannabis people, which is sometimes why I'm hesitant to post my videos on LinkedIn, because like, oh, this is not news or anything. But I feel like there's an equal amount of like professional discourse, most, not all people, and and support on LinkedIn.
I get it. I don't, so I'm more of a lurker on TikTok and Instagram than
Mm-hmm.
I am a poster. And I don't think that I have skin thick enough to deal with the hate comments. Because I mean, like you said, LinkedIn is, more professional discourse. But even there's always somebody that is just an asshole. Okay, so yeah, social media is fun, and I'm posting like little snippets of the MyFlora Fridays on
Mm-hmm.
that, trying to get traction, and maybe people will be interested because I think that having cannabis experts in their various respective fields talking about real things,
Mm-hmm.
I think is really valuable for like you said, we live kind of in an echo chamber because there's not that many of us cannabis experts. Like there's a lot of people who love cannabis and there's a lot of people who think they know a lot about cannabis. But
Yes.
and that's fine, I guess, but there's a whole lot. I mean, when I first started, I had no idea how much I didn't know, and I'm still blown away by how much I don't know, right?
Right. Right. There's so much that we don't know. about, how cannabis works in the body. I mean, there's a lot we do know, and there's so much like nuance to it. And I, what I see a lot of times on LinkedIn are these people, most of the time, they're a specific gender, and like they have these theories about the science of it all, but like they don't have like this core understanding of human physiology. Or maybe you see it on like the plant side. Like, I don't know shit about plants. You will rarely see me post anything about cultivation and plants, because I don't know shit about like that side of it. But you have people who think that they have this understanding, so then they like post it as 100% truth, and there's like no nuance to it. And you see medical professionals approach things very delicately and use specific language, like, this could help you, or this has helped a lot of other people, so maybe we need to look into it. But then you see people saying, this is the cause of it, this is what you need to try, this is going to cure your issue. And those are like big red flags. Like, you don't, for the most part, see medical professionals speaking in that way. And
Hmm.
that can be dangerous, because then people take that as advice and then may not have good outcomes.
Yeah, there are people with like big followers, so the average person sees them as being an authoritative figure. Like, oh, they have, 100,000 followers, they must know what they're talking about, when
Right.
really, they talk a big talk, and then when you ask them for evidence, it's like crickets. Or, they give you some bullshit answer, and it's like, well, that's not really what I asked
Right.
for.
And we see this also on the other side with medical professionals who have not been taught about cannabis. Come on, they have a huge following, and then they speak on cannabis, and they're only speaking to a single paper or a single review. And like, nuance is also missing from how they're speaking, because they're only speaking to what the research says, which we just found out like in a recently published paper, like could be all bullshit anyways. And then they're coming to speak on it, and they clearly don't have experience or training on this subject, but they come and they have this huge following, so people think that what they're saying is true. And that's, you know my job. I like to put them in their place, so to speak. Be like, maybe you shouldn't be speaking on this because you haven't been formally trained in it, or you don't have
Mhm.
experience with it. I'm not coming on social media talking to people about brain surgery. Not my specialty. I can find a paper on it, but I'm still not going to speak on it, because it's
Mhm.
not, there's nuance.
People ask me all the time about patients and medical uses in healthcare, and I'm like, I am a plant person, I am not a people person. Like, I know about physiology, I know how, I know about
Mm-hmm.
the ACS, I know how, there's receptors, but I don't know enough to be talking like I'm an expert. And I don't know if it's the PhD part that people just are like, oh, cannabis, she must know what is going to help me with my headaches. I sure don't. And knowing what I know is, I probably any healthcare person is not going to know what strain's going to cure your headache either,
Right.
because all the plants are unique and all the people are unique, and it's not like pharmaceuticals where it's like this thing does this thing to most people.
Right. Yes, exactly. And what you'll have medical professionals do instead is say, oh, there's not enough research to support it. Or like the research, just doesn't support it. And what we found, or what this paper that was recently published, is about this thing called the reverse spin bias. So it's basically like the gaslighting of medical research. So what these authors did was they looked at controversial treatments such as cannabis for pain or e-cigarettes for smoking cessation, and they looked at systematic reviews. The research that they found like supported these interventions for this issue. However, the authors themselves came back like in that review and said, we actually can't recommend it, and it's not supportive. And what they found was, in reviewing 20, I'm going to read it, in reviewing 20 different systematic reviews, they found like 5 consistencies. And they found that these consistent mechanisms by which the authors are discrediting the findings. They discount the evidence, They discredit the primary studies. They appeal to fear. They dismiss the treatment before actually looking at it, and they omit the findings. So when we see these big reviews saying like cannabis doesn't actually help with pain, and we're like, what? Like, how can you have so many people in the real world reporting that it does, but then the research doesn't? How does that make sense? And these authors are saying that it's like this thing called reverse spin bias, where the authors spin the findings of the research to fit their narrative to then get published. And then you have mainstream media latching onto that and printing that. And then you have medical professionals reading that and speaking about it. And then it's this other perpetual cycle that doesn't move the needle forward in advancing plant medicine. I'm so mad when I read that.
I'll look that up and I'll put the study up on the screen so that.
Yeah.
Yep. But so something that comes to mind when you were talking about that is when I was doing my PhD research on the cannabis out of the University of Mississippi. So the research grade marijuana that is grown for NIDA for specific like health studies or whatever
Mm-hmm.
for research. It's not like anything you could find on any shelf. It's not like any hemp product, and it's not like any marijuana product that you would find on the market, on the legal market. And so I went diving for, okay, so how many of these studies have used research grade marijuana? And I had a really hard time finding many at all. I think I found a total of 9 that used research grade marijuana, and people were actually smoking it to look for, various things.
Mm-hmm.
Glaucoma is one thing that comes to mind. But most of the studies out there are done on isolates or tinctures. They're not done on smokable cannabis. And so when you have a study that on sleep and doesn't find any or finds very little evidence for cannabis working on sleep, it's like, well, what was the product that they were testing? Because it'll say cannabis or marijuana in the
Right.
title, but then when you get into the methods, the materials and methods, it's like, well, we used a tincture, and it's like, okay, well, so that's not smoking it. So all of the people that are saying, oh yeah, I like to smoke a bowl and it helps me go to sleep, well, they're not testing the same thing.
Right.
So
Right. And that's the issue also, is that like I'm so passionate about this, that like when we're looking at the research, it's not that there's not enough research, is that we have to look at it through a different lens. We have to look at what's happening in the real world and
mhm,
use that as evidence of whether or not to just consider cannabis and using plant medicine and going to a dispensary. Because right now we're looking at it through a pharmaceutical lens, and we compare, the randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial, this reductionist approach, that does this molecule have this specific effect, or is it the placebo having the effect? But in cannabis, we don't know which single molecule it is, because cannabis has hundreds of molecules, and it's the combination of them that is the magic that creates the effects. But that's just so that square peg in a round hole with the FDA model. The FDA like can't compute that, right? That's why there are only 3 botanical medicines that have gone through the FDA approval pathway compared
mhm.
to thousands of pharmaceuticals. But other countries have managed to put, whole plant medicine and flower into their pharmaceutical library or whatever it is, so that it can actually be prescribed. But America just can't. So yeah, we have to look at it through a lens of patient outcomes. Are the patients improving? What are the side effects happening at the population level? As opposed to this super controlled setting where we're just looking at one variable, but that doesn't mimic what's happening in the real world. People are on multiple medications. People have, they have these other disorders going on that we're not seeing that in the research. So of course,
Mhm.
doctors are going to say there's not enough research to support it, so I can't recommend it. Blah 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 blah. It's perpetual cycle.
And right. And the average consumer and or patient is going down to their local dispensary, purchasing flower, smoking a bowl or a vape or a bong, like vaporized
Mm-hmm.
flower or a bong or whatever. And in the clinical trials, that is not how they're giving these patients their medicine, right? We know that. So they're not going to be making people smoke for these clinical trials in general.
Mm-hmm.
So they're giving them, the tinctures, or it could even be, and I haven't seen a lot of this either, the is it an atomizer or, some sort of,
Oh, like a nebulizer.
yeah, like that kind of treatment. But that's still not what people are doing, right?
Right.
So we're comparing apples and oranges in these clinical trials. So we've got the people that are not in the clinical trials going, no, but seriously, like there's a whole bunch of us who it's
Yeah.
helping. And then but the clinical trials say that it's not, so therefore it's not. And it's like, but wait, but there's a whole bunch of people that are saying that it is. So somewhere there's a disconnect with the science, and to me that says that the science is looking in the wrong spot. Didn't
Absolutely.
find the answer, but we're searching in the wrong cupboard.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And because we looked in the wrong spot, we're gonna say it's not a safe, effective treatment. But
Mhm.
we have real world evidence showing the opposite. So there's this huge disconnect, and it feels like being gaslit by medical research.
I completely agree because in the plant world, right? All the time you get, oh, there's no such thing as indica or sativa. And it's like, well, okay, well, you're talking about morphology because there
Right.
is a sativa morphology and there is an indica morphology, and they're based on the geography of where they adapted to. There's also indica effects and sativa effects. Do those have anything to do with the plant morphology? No. And when you're talking to a consumer, more often than not, they're going to have no idea what that plant looked like. But they're talking about effects solely. And when you try to take an indica type plant and a sativa type plant and then match those two together, effects and morphology, you get no correlation. And so, science is saying there's no such thing as indica and sativa. What it is there's no correlation between an indica type morphology and an indica type effect.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean there's no such thing as indica and sativa. Not
Right.
what the science says at all. And also, we haven't looked in all of the cupboards yet. We've only looked at like THC, CBD, another handful of cannabinoids, and a handful of terpenes. And like you said,
Right.
there are hundreds of compounds. Is there something else that is produced by plants that evolved in a place where an indica type morphology is more likely to thrive versus a sativa? They've got different
Mhm.
pest pressures, they've got different environmental pressures. One's more tropical, one's more like, mountainous, cold
Right.
climate.
Right.
So it wouldn't surprise me if there's some sort of chemicals that are produced in those different morphology type plants, because they're locally adapted to different areas. They have different pests. They're going to produce different,
Hmm.
things that are going to help them
Yep.
survive. So I'm just like, yeah, I'm not buying into that yet. Once we open all the cupboards and take a really good hard look and sweep, all the corners, then I
Hmm.
think we can arrive at the answer. But I think we've only really looked in like one or two cupboards for this.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Completely agree.
And all right, so lastly, I would love for you to talk about where you feel like rescheduling is going to go. Like, I'll clarify, nobody wants rescheduling, everybody wants descheduling.
Mhm.
It looks like that's not going to be the first thing that happens. It doesn't mean that Schedule 3 is the end of the road though, right? Schedule
Right.
3 could be a stepping stone to descheduling. And then yeah, so talk about that, and then I might have one
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what Schedule 3 would mean. Schedule 3 means that cannabis would have to be a pharmaceutical, just like other Schedule 3 medications like ketamine, anabolic steroids, Tylenol with codeine, I think is a Schedule 3 medication. These are all FDA approved medications. So Schedule 3 would mean that cannabis has to go through the FDA approval process. And as we've talked about, that process, like whole plant medicine, the pathway is not there. So unless something changes at the FDA level, which I know that there are proposals to do that, to allow a separate track for whole plant medicine. But if that doesn't change, then that means that we're just looking at synthesized and isolated compounds as pharmaceuticals, tightly regulated. In order for something to go through the FDA pathway, it has to be for a very, very specific condition. You take a look at Epidiolex. It's only approved for two very rare pediatric seizure conditions. It's not all of epilepsy. It's these two super rare things because that's what was studied. But we're not going to see, okay, here, go get some bud for your chronic pain. It's going to be like, here's this pill, this THC isolate or something for your chemo induced peripheral neuropathy. So it's going to be very tightly controlled and regulated. And that's like cannabis consumers don't want that. we don't want to see that. I mean, yeah, it would be covered by insurance, but people are still going to want to go and get some regular flower and be able to consume flower or their whole plant tinctures. So I don't know, like when and if it goes to Schedule 3, what is the incentive? Why would it be moved from Schedule 3 to descheduling? What's the incentive of that? If it's already under pharmaceutical control at that point, why are we going to deschedule it? So I think that the structure of how we do medicine on a national level has to change in order for us to like fully legalize or deschedule. And hopefully we'll see that. I know that there are groups working on that and proposing that, but unless that changes, like it's just we're all fucked, basically.
Well, but okay, but like if you think about it, it's already illegal at the federal level, right? And
Right.
yet in multiple states, over half of the states, we have dispensaries, we have medical programs that where you can get cannabis, right?
Hmm.
So I don't think that's going to change. Like it's not going to go to Schedule 3 and every single state's just going to be like, all right, board it up, guys. Like
Right.
you can't
Right.
do business anymore.
Hopefully that is a concern of some people who like know a lot more than I do about federal policy, that's their concern, is that state programs will go away with Schedule 3. But I think that the Rohrabacher Farr amendment, that one has been on the shelves for a couple of years, but I think they actually renewed it this year, and that's the amendment that says we're not going to use federal funds to prosecute state regulated cannabis, licenses and operations.
I think there's
So
so much money for the states that comes from cannabis in states where it is legal that there is no way that, states like California, states like New York, states like New Jersey are going to be like, okay, cool. We got it. We're just going to shut our program.
yeah, there's definitely going to be fight and pushback, and I think that's what the federal policy has to contend with also. So it's like we're just, I don't know, can we salvage this into a comprehensive legalization program like other countries have done,
I
or
said,
are we, some people would just rather it stay the way that it is now and just maintain the access that they have now.
I'm like, yeah, it's already illegal and people have access and it's fine. I do think that the hemp language needs to be tightened up.
Mhm.
I think that seeds should stay hemp because you can buy poppy seeds. Why can't you buy cannabis seeds? Like it's just dumb, right?
Yeah.
And we should regulate the, what does Cody say? Regulate the drugs, not the plant.
Yeah, regulate drugs as drugs and plants as plants.
Right? And I think that makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense. Like
absolutely.
you can grow poppies at home, you just can't make morphine. Right? You
Yeah.
can't make heroin at home. You're not allowed to do that. Yeah, regulate the plants or don't regulate the plants and regulate the drugs. But yeah, but I do think that you know, no synthetics, nothing made in a lab. If it doesn't come from the plant, then it's not
Yep.
hemp. I
Yep.
think that language needs to be tightened, and I think that's a good move. But yeah, like Schedule 3, I don't see the point of doing it, and I don't even see it being a pathway to loosen research
Right.
area,
The research is just going to be on those pharmaceutical versions.
which it already is. There's already money for that. It's already, they've already got, calls out for specific research on specific cannabinoids. And that's been
Hmm.
going on for years now. So that's not going to change. So it doesn't make any sense to move it to Schedule 3, in my opinion. Yeah, just leave it where it is and don't create the headache or just deschedule it, which I don't know, may or may not happen.
Yep. Yeah.
But I don't have any control over this shit. I don't even know who to write to. Where do I send my strongly worded email?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so hard to feel empowered in this game, especially at the federal level.
Well, and California is a fun place to be too, right? With all of the taxes and regulations that it's pretty hardcore in California, as I've been led to believe.
Yes. Yes. I mean, hemp is even illegal in California. So,
Crazy. All right. Well, I don't have any more questions for you, but do you have any questions for me, or is there anything else you want to talk about that we didn't cover? All
did
right. I think so. Well, I guess the last thing is how do people find you should they need you or any of the EntheaCare team.
Yeah, if they need us, they can go to EntheaCare.com. And then there are multiple links to talk to a nurse or check out our products there. I'm on all the socials at EntheaCare or Enthea.care for the free educational content. And then people can reach out to me directly on the socials as well.
All right, cool. Megan, it's been so fun. I love talking to you. You're always a blast to hang out with.
Thanks for
And
having me on.
yeah, I can't wait to see you again. I don't know if you're going to be in Atlantic City for MJ Unpacked.
I am.
But again, it was so good to see you, and I will
You
see
too.
you again and around the socials probably later today.
Sounds good. Thanks, Anna.
All right, bye, Megan.
Bye.